Hello, listeners. This is your host, Henry. If we have any new listeners here, this is the In Our Bodies podcast, a podcast made by and for people of color who are chronically ill, neurodivergent, and/or disabled. But as I always say, formal diagnoses aside, we are just striving to understand and celebrate bodies and minds in all the ways they come to us. As I'm recording this intro, it seems that I'm having a bit of a eczema flare-up myself, so it seems quite fitting that this episode is all about eczema. I hope your day is going well, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, welcome back to the In Our Bodies podcast. This episode we have Dan. Dan uses he, him pronouns. He is originally from London, currently living in Vancouver. And Dan is a documentary/film producer. Hello, Dan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Thank you for having me on.
So I think usually when my guests feel comfortable, I start with kind of asking some, and like in your words, what you have to say about like your chronic illness, or like what you would like to share, or like what your history is with it, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think chronic illness, or at least like um, disorders or conditions that will be there in the long term, if not completely chronic, have certainly shaped my life since I was really young and if not born. You know, I was diagnosed with uh, like atopic dermatitis, or otherwise known as eczema, from the age of a few months, and it's essentially ruled my life up until this day, and will do probably for the rest of my life. And I think there's definitely an interesting intersection between that and mental health. And um, I think that mental health piece is something that I've come to acknowledge and experience on a first-hand basis far more acutely in the last few years.
Can I ask? I have eczema. I don't know if I even have the answer to this. For someone who doesn't know what eczema is, like, can you explain like what is happening in the body, or like what is your understanding of like what's happening to your body when like you're coping with eczema?
From a like physiological, biological point of view, the way I understand it is that it's essentially your own immune system attacking your own body when it's not meant to be. And ultimately, the flare ups you get, the itchiness, the redness, the swelling, is essentially an immune response, but it's a defective immune response. In my case, it's often detecting foods as the things the body is trying to attack. You know,
Essentially, you're allergic
um,
to a lot of things, right?
yeah, three things:
Okay.
dairy, shellfish, coconut, eczema. On a kind of like practical day to day, like personal basis, I guess eczema is constant itchiness where flare ups can happen at any time of day in response to almost a whole number of variables, and the more allergens or factors you can pinpoint, the better. But it's not an exact science because anything can happen. But ultimately, yeah, it's a condition that I guess I am always worried about and always thinking about. I
Yeah,
don't know if
because
that's a good explanation.
oh,
But
well, it's your explanation, which is what I'm looking for, right? Like, and to clarify, it's like you have these things that you're allergic to ingesting that will kind of like definitely cause a flare up, but regardless, there are still many unknown factors just in life that could cause, like, just because you don't eat those things doesn't mean that your skin isn't going to still get itchy, be dry, etc., right?
For sure. Yeah, it could be anything. It could be like mental health factors, it could be stress, it could be anxiety, it could be environmental factors. It could just be like being too hot for too long, being too cold for too long, sweating
Yeah.
too much. It could be like being in a dusty environment. It could be like wearing the wrong type of like fabric. Like it literally could be fucking anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hardest parts about it is the sort of unpredictability. If it was as binary as don't do this and this won't happen, then our lives would be a lot easier. But
Wouldn't it be
unfortunately, it's
so
not.
easy if we just had the allergies and there wasn't just like, and is it ever changing for you? Because I didn't. So I have same as you. Obviously, it's not just dictated by food allergies, but the allergies that I know about is that I'm allergic to nuts and coconut, but I wasn't allergic until I turned like 16. Like I used to eat peanut butter. I know what Nutella tastes like, but I can no
Yeah, so I
longer eat it.
for the longest time I've always been allergic to dairy. It's like my parents found out because like they in the UK they have like this cheese. I don't know if you had it in Canada growing up, but like the Dairy cheese that came in triangles, and
Okay.
it was like a circle of cheese cut up into like
Yeah.
triangular
I'm
segments.
sure there's like versions of it here as well.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
And my mom to like when I was really young to shut me up while she'd put me in the trolley, right? I'd be sitting in the trolley, like to shut me up. She would like just feed me this like this little soft cheese in
Hmm.
triangles. And as a kid, lots of kids have eczema. She didn't really realize, but um, my skin was like flaring up. It was really bad. And then I think I got ill for like 2 weeks, and I didn't go grocery shopping with my mum in those 2 weeks, and then my skin cleared up, and then they
Wild.
realized it was the dairy, the cheese that was triggering my eczema in that crazy way. So I've always known I was allergic to dairy. Shellfish came a bit later, when I was in Malaysia, where my parents grew up, and we went to a seafood restaurant, and there's like lobsters and squid and crab flying around. I just had the worst flare of my life.
Oof.
And then we realized that was that one, and then coconut was something in the last 5 years.
Okay.
Like avoiding dairy, a lot of like dairy alternatives, like vegan food uses coconut, and then I realized, yeah, and then I was like, oh, I'm not eating any dairy. These are all like coconut based things. And I was like, oh, I'm
Mm,
allergic to coconut. Great.
yeah.
So whatever diet I choose, can't really win because the way I've thought about it's funny. Like I kind of joke with my friends, like a very Western diet, right? Like grew up in the UK, like a lot of like Western foods or like British foods, American whatever
Beige
you call
food.
it. Well, ultimately a lot of it uses dairy, butter,
Hmm, hmm.
cream, whatever. Um, with Asian food, like well, at least like Chinese like food, like uses a lot of shellfish, like oyster
Hmm.
sauce, um, lots of other shellfish. And then I was like, fine, I'll be vegan, which I am. And then I'm allergic to coconut, which half all vegan foods use.
Yeah.
use.
Or like
And it
coconut
was like,
oil
yeah.
substitute, coconut this, coconut milk that. Yeah.
And I just can't win. I just cannot win, and my body hates me. But that's part of life, and that's part of my story. And yeah, it's no point like getting angry about it or like getting upset about it. Like you
Well,
just
oftentimes I still get angry about it anyway. But that leads me to my next question. In the pre-interview, or like just like through chatting, you disclosed to me that kind of more in recent years, or maybe this year, there was like a breaking point that you had, and you after that kind of started to like seek therapy or just seek more mental health support for yourself? Can you like walk me through or walk us through what led you to that breaking point? Like, what was your kind of, in whatever way you're comfortable disclosing, like what led you up to that point and kind of how's therapy going?
Yeah. It's difficult to know where to start because I guess when it comes to all sort of like mental health disorders, it's really, like finding out where the genesis of it is part of what you try to explore in therapy, right?
Mm,
And I don't think, there is a clean answer, but there are definitely certain catalysts and triggers that bring the disorder to the surface, I guess. But
mm,
look, I think it was a combination of a lot of things. I think one of the factors that I guess I never really appreciated until it all hit me, was COVID. And just just before I go further, I guess I should say that, like, yeah, ultimately I had a bit of I don't know, not sure if I should call it a breakdown or not, but there
you
was
can
a
call it whatever
breaking
you
point.
want.
Yeah, it's hard to know, like, but let's call it a breakdown for the sake of this conversation, shall we? But ultimately, I was put on a leave of absence from my job. I wasn't working for like nearly 2 months, and I was like referred to um, like a psychiatric assessment center, and they diagnosed me with anxiety and disorders and sort of other surrounding things. Um, and
And before
I
this,
think
had you ever been to therapy or like had language around mental health in
no,
kind of like
not
no?
not really, not
Okay.
in any substantial way. No.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, like that's what happened, and I guess a lot of the factors, yeah, like I said, a lot of factors. The one thing that hit me was COVID. That was like almost a year and a bit into COVID. I'd not been able to go back to the UK for like over a year at that point. I had 2 trips cancelled. I think, like all of us, we were suffering from a level of like isolate, sort of social, a lack of kind of like social presence, and activities. And I think that crept up on me quite a lot. But there was also the stress of my work. I had a couple of jobs that didn't go that well. I mean, from a personal point of view, I didn't feel supported. Um, and then um, I was like going through at the time, or just sort of it just happened at least, the breakup of my long term relationship of about 6 years.
Wow.
Um, and I think, you know, a lot of factors came together. It was sort of like wrong time, wrong place, all these kind of problems colliding that ultimately just led to, I guess, this breaking point that meant that it was like certainly like a good. I guess it was like almost like a turning point in sort of the
Mm-hmm.
last few years for me. It
Mm-hmm.
made me reassess a lot of things, and you know, um, and sort of try to. I don't know. I guess like life feels different, you know, after than compared to before in many ways. And a lot of that is down to having to manage my anxiety and then sort of my mental health.
And what have you come to explore after this kind of turning point? Or like also possibly was there anything that you were afraid of confronting when you started this process? Because it seems like there might have been, especially if this is your first encounter with mental health discourse, in maybe not your first encounter, but maybe your first encounter like with the help of a professional, like I think that it can be pretty intense, right? Like, were there any fears, or like what did you like start exploring, or what have you explored?
You know what? I think one thing that hit me was, it's funny. I remember when talking to therapists, and I would like frame talking about my parents and my upbringing as like, oh, this is so cliche to talk about my childhood in therapy, and I'd always sort of caveat it with like, oh, this probably isn't even relevant. And my
Mm,
therapist stopped me, and he was like, why do you think your childhood is irrelevant? Why do you think your parents' upbringing is irrelevant to your the way you think and your mental state as an adult? Like, that's exactly, where, it's nature and nurture. It's all of that, right? And
mm-hmm,
it made me realize, like, oh yeah, right. I don't know why I'm so dismissive that it didn't. A lot of my upbringing didn't affect me, and I think that took me by surprise. It was like delving quite deep into who my parents were, um, their personalities, and in turn how they raised me.
mm,
And I'm not saying like, oh, I'm blaming my parents for my mental health issues. Far from it. In fact, like, um, it's not that at all. It's like, I think understanding their psyche during the period of time when they were raising me was really important for me to understand why I think the way I do. They were immigrants into a new country. They were ethnic minorities, vast ethnic minorities, like vastly outnumbered.
mm-hmm,
Um, sort of East Asian and Southeast Asian people, or people from those origins, were not, what I mean, like, weren't prevalent, and weren't, you didn't see that many, um, like Chinese people or Southeast Asian or East Asian people walking around London at that time,
okay,
really, and you still don't particularly,
yeah,
but and I think understanding that was my parents. That's what my parents were dealing with at the time when they had me and my brother, and when they were raising me. Like, it made me realize that actually, like, yeah, like, no wonder they were cautious and paranoid of situations that that I guess, and they're often worried about. They made assumptions about certain things because the world that we were growing up in was not the world that they grew up in and knew,
mm-hmm,
inside out. And
mm-hmm.
it's hard to be comfortable with parts of the unknown, and and they faced persecution, I'm sure. So all to say is that, like, yeah, that definitely was, I guess, one of the most challenging things for me. It's challenging and surprising things for me was truly understanding, I guess, my parents' experiences and how that really affected, or is affecting my experience.
Did you get a chance, or have you explored growing up sick with your parents? Because that's something that I swing back and forth, but I think I find more peace and understanding for my parents as I get older, as I kind of creep into the age that they had me, and kind of knowing or understanding what capacity I have as a person. Like, did you ever explore in therapy, like, or like, were you ever talking about like being sick or having eczema, and like the relationship that kind of primed for you and your parents?
No, I think I don't remember having many conversations about my eczema with my parents that weren't just you know, do we need to get you more prescription medication? Like, how are you running out of your creams? Are you, like, I don't think it was just an everyday factor of growing up and my life and by extension their life. I don't think we ever stopped to talk about it in any sort of deep or meaningful way. It was very like a lot of practical conversations about it. A lot of like just trying to do what we could do to you know ease the flare up or the pain or discomfort in that moment. um, or like doctors and dermatologists, like so no, I don't think I really did.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I have very similar experience in that way. I don't know if I think I had a similar conversation with another friend of mine who's also Chinese, that like there was never a conversation about like, hey, how are you doing, or like, are you concerned, like, is this like any, like, I don't think that there was that much of a presence of like an emotional conversation in that aspect in regards to being sick. That's true for you as well, right?
I think so. Yeah, and I think a lot of my friends who grew up with a similar cultural background is like in general, emotions and mental health aren't particularly spoken about within the family.
Mm.
It's just not something that's acknowledged in any big way. Um, in a lot of families, it's probably repressed quite actively. And
So
I'm not saying that that's my experience of my family. Like
mhm.
I would say, on in the grand scheme of things, my parents were probably fairly open and sort of, I guess, like perhaps a little bit more sort of liberal than I guess the average Asian parents. I mean, that's just you know a complete assumption from my part because I don't have the experience of growing up with any other
Mm.
parents. But I mean, that's I guess how I feel when I sort of compare notes with my friends.
Were they in the loop when you kind of had that turning point and was kind of like on leave from work slash like seeking kind of professional help with your mental health? Like, did they
Yeah,
know about that? Do they know about that?
yeah.
What are the conversations like in when you're, an adult with them about mental health?
I think I shielded them a little bit from it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I didn't share with them the full extent of everything that happened. But obviously, they knew that I was taking a leave of absence. I was off work. They knew that I was like stressed. I think they largely put it down to stress and anxiety and work related stuff. But I think they read between the lines a little bit of like everything else happening too. You know, they knew that I was going through this breakup, and you know, we were talking for sure, and they were up to speed of what was happening. But
Okay.
maybe I left out some of the harder parts of the conversation. uh, You know,
Yeah.
and I think that more came from a place of not wanting to worry them and protecting
Mm.
them.
Mm.
Because they're on the other side of the world. They can't do that much other than check in.
Mm-hmm.
What's the point of going through it all and worrying them? Like seem pointless.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also I think, and this is just this is my experience, and I don't know if it's yours as well, but sometimes I try to, because I think it's speaking about my mental health is much more normalized and kind of like with my partner or like with the group of friends I keep around me. It's just, I think that the less of a big deal I make it, the less intense everything feels. So the more I get to talk about how I'm feeling casually, the better it is. But like with my parents, saying anything negative makes them go like, why are you feeling this way? Like
Yeah.
bad. Like they just
Yeah.
they get very concerned, and then they're like, how do you stop feeling like this immediately? Or like, it's just, or like, why are you feeling like this? It's very, it feels very alarming to them, or like the
I'll
reaction
make you the
it gets.
soup. I know this tea that'll help. Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is honestly so great. I love all of that. I do call
Yeah.
my parents for like herbal remedies or like what to eat all the time, and I love it.
Stop eating fried foods.
Yeah, pretty much.
Too much heat.
uh,
I'm just like,
Drink
okay,
more
man.
water, don't drink cold stuff, cold things
Yeah.
never. But yeah, so I find it like, it's been a long journey for me as well, but I still find it hard sometimes just to be vulnerable, because I don't know if it's just that way for them, but they don't like to talk about that stuff. They don't like dwelling it. Like, it works very well for them. It's always been like a point of conflict in my family, that like they're very good at going like, meh, okay, moving on. Like, and I've always been like a person with like really big emotions, and like I don't think they've really ever known what to do with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, I would, I completely empathize with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Um Kind of linking the mental health conversation back to eczema, something that you brought up that I did a little bit of research on is psychodermatology. And that is basically, for the listeners, kind of like the combination of psychology and dermatology. I'm not I'm not like that big of a fan of the person who is like kind of more famous for it, so I'm not going to name their names. Like some white lady that is like apparently like some A-list dermatologist that like works with Chanel. Like, I don't know. Like, I read the articles and it was like, but the concept is cool because it is combining psychology and kind of like the well-being of our mental health, and how that affects our skin, or how our skin can also be like affecting our mental health, right? And something that like I've been unpacking a lot is how, or like something I've been really angry about for a long time, is how lacking that mental health part has always been in the conversation of eczema. Like, the fact that I have never, and still I've never learned any kind of pain management. Nobody has ever really kind of linked the two. I think there's more conversations of it now, regardless of in the kind of umbrella term of psychodermatology or not. Like people are more aware of kind of just the mental stresses that eczema or chronic illness will have. But like, yeah, I have a lot of anger towards the fact that like I've been sick since I was 3 with like very severe stuff, but the aspect of mental health has never been kind of talked about in tandem with chronic illness. How do you see that in your own life? Like the kind of like the combination of psychology with with your eczema.
I think for sure, I think I would have benefited from being able to even just acknowledge there was a mental health factor, a psychological factor
Mm,
to suffering from a skin condition. You
mm,
know, I read somewhere that like 90% of people who suffer from a skin condition also like report like a lower sense of self esteem. You
mm.
know, that sounds obvious, but it just shows like the two things are intricately linked. I think in a world where you know beauty standards are so fucking high, and having perfect skin, hair, teeth, nails, whatever,
Yeah.
you know in a world where like the smallest blemish on your skin is like or is photoshopped.
Yeah.
In a world where we have these like filters that like make your skin look smoother or
Mm-hmm.
more glowy. Or fuck knows. I mean, I think they all look really fake, but I, I guess my point is like the world where we're all expected to have like perfect skin because that's what's attractive. It's fucking obvious, isn't it? Like when someone has a chronic skin condition and they're
Yeah.
so far away from that beauty standard, of
Yeah.
course it's going to affect how you think about yourself and your
Mm-hmm.
overall self-esteem. You know, and another thing I read was that around 50% of the people that I guess they surveyed, like of when they were, you know, often avoid face-to-face contact.
Mm.
You know, like for face-to-face interactions, and that hit home
Yeah.
completely because yeah, like you start second guessing what people are thinking about you when they look at you, or you know, oh, are they noticing that, you know, like, oh, my, that patch on my forehead, like, oh, are they noticing that, you know, like that area of my face is really dry and a bit red, like, you know, and then you're just derailed, like
Yeah.
psychologically, like you're not you're trying to keep the conversation going or whatever you're doing, that interaction going, but at the same time you've got this thing in the back of your head, you've got this like second train of thought that's like constantly just jabbing you, you know, in the side, being like, oh, you look terrible, like this lighting's really bad, oh, this
Yeah.
person can see like my dry, like wrinkly, horrible skin, this is really exposing, like, oh, do they think something's wrong with me, oh, are they a bit disgusted by it, like, oh,
Yeah.
like they must think I'm like not looking after myself, whatever is going through my head.
Yeah.
But for sure I've always had that since I was young, like,
Yeah.
and it's so sad to think that I was almost more worried about what other people thought about my skin than I did. Um, and yeah, like I just, yeah, for sure, the link is there, and it's always been there, and it's just. I remember reading an article about psychodermatology, like I don't know, like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and I just realized I was like you, I was like, how's it taken so long for people to start studying that connection between the two? Because for people who suffer from skin conditions, it's just so obvious and it's always been there, but we've never had a forum to talk about it
Mm-hmm.
or research to refer to or or anything really. It's just been something that we suffered through, you know.
And even when I see a lot of wider acceptance of like body shape and ethnicity and stuff, sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm still never going to see anyone that looks like me because I'm like, whatever I have is still considered a disease or a sickness. Therefore, it's very okay for it to not be, uh, like, for it to still be like, ew. You know what I mean? Or like, I have yet to ever see anyone that like looks like me or has like a skin
I know
condition.
it's so funny. I remember like as a kid or like googling like celebrities with eczema.
Really?
Yeah. Um, I remember that, and like I can't remember who used to come up, but um, I remember, yeah, looking, being like, oh, like maybe that other people that are really successful and famous that
Yeah.
also go through what I go through and look at their lives. I don't know, but I
Did you
think
find any?
Leanne Rhymes, I
Oh, great.
think.
Amazing.
Maybe I'm just making that up, or really it has not been. Maybe we can look it up afterwards, but
I'll confirm in
um,
the show notes. Does Liam
yeah,
Rhymes have eczema?
I think I can't remember, but there were very few for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
I also like had dreams of, as many young people do, I had dreams of like being a pop star or whatever. I'm like, I could never do it. Like I could never wear makeup or I could never be in bright lights. Like it's just not, it's not possible for me because I can't do all of those things or I can't look like those people. And that's definitely, I don't know, something that I've thought about. I've definitely avoided bright lights for a long time, or it's also just so obsessive, right? Because obviously there is the looks part of it, and that fucking sucks because it's something that you deal with in all aspects. Like you deal with it emotionally, you deal with it like it is painful and uncomfortable in a lot of ways already. And then depending on where you have it, but I have for long periods had it like on my face amongst all other places. I've probably had it on all of my body, maybe not the bottom of my foot, like at one point or another. And it's kind of like you're dealing with this, but you have there's no choice in whether or not other people know you're dealing with it or not. It's like it's apparent and you have no control over that. And it's like, and because you have no, or like I have no control over that, like I've become obsessively trying to like control the things that I can control about how people can perceive me, whether that being like um, wearing makeup at some point, or like avoiding bright lights, or like, taking pictures weird, or like not taking pictures at all. Like I skipped so many school photos, like when I was younger and stuff. Like it was just like always this like race to try to find some semblance of control of how people were perceiving me, because like a big part of that was already lost by the fact that I had this, it's on my face. There's like only so much, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. But I also think it's one thing I came to realize was that like most people don't notice it, don't care, haven't even thought about it to the depth that you have. You know, like I obsess over like how patchy this little thing looks on my face, but other people have also said to me like, "Oh, I didn't even realize you had eczema," you know, and I think, I think like that's good to hear, but it's so jarring in a different way because it's like everything you're ever thinking about.
Yeah.
It's like you're obsessed with it. Like you said, like it rules your life. It dictates your every move, like your every action sometimes on some days. And then to sort of say someone to like just be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing all that? Like
Yeah.
effectively that's what they're saying, and you're like, that's so jarring.
Yeah.
That is so, and you're like, why am I doing this? If people don't care, don't notice, and ultimately, I guess we have to tell ourselves that like we care about it so much more than other people, and that won't stop the pain and discomfort and the itchiness and us feeling the way we do. But at least if we can remove the part of it, which for me is a big part of it, is like how people perceive me, what people think of me
Yeah.
when they see me and my skin. Like, surely that's a huge part of the equation removed that
Yeah.
can help us find some level of comfort, with it all.
It took me a long time. I think there was a while where I really didn't know the extent of my nut allergy, so I was still like popping a Ferrero Rocher here or there, being like, it's fine, negotiating with my eczema. And it was like definitely still flaring up to a point where like essentially what would happen is that like all of my face skin would crust and then like shed within 24 hours, and it would just keep doing that. And like I would wear makeup and then just hope people wouldn't see it or like whatever. And after a while I was just like exhausted, and I asked myself this question. I was like, what if I didn't care about being fuckable? Like, what if I just stopped caring for a little bit because I'm effing exhausted? And what would that do for me? And it changed a lot. It doesn't mean that I don't care, but I just don't care to the same degree that I used to. And I think that, like,
Yeah.
as you said, it really did kind of quell a part of the larger kind of like mental health or anxiety that I was feeling for a long time, because I already have to deal with the pain and so much discomfort and whatever. If there are days where like I quote unquote look very bad, but I actually don't feel that bad, I'm going to count that as a win, and I'm not going to create problems for myself, because
there's already so many other problems. So if it's just how it looks today and not that much else, like that's chill for me. Or like sometimes that's chill for me, not always, but you know what I mean? Like just at least trying to get there.
Yeah, for me, it's like, for me, it was accepting that, like, if I don't want to do something or I'm not comfortable in a situation because of my skin at that point in time, or I'm in a restaurant where I'm just like nervous about like their
Eating.
ability to like, yeah, like, to like keep, like cross contamination or in the preparation of the food, I'll just nope the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
And for me, there was a lot of peer pressure to like conform and be normal and not make a fuss in restaurants when I'm like have to like mention my allergies, or be in a room where I'm like, this is just too fucking hot and I'm getting
Yeah.
itchy, or like this drums or whatever I am, I'm like, this is too dusty and dirty, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, my skin's crawling. Like I think a younger version of me would have just like suffered it and
Yep.
been like, no, don't make a fuss, like just
Yep.
don't make a scene, have a good time, just deal with the consequences later. But actually now I'm just like, no,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't
And
want to do this anymore.
that's also part of the like people not noticing, but also people really not acknowledging the shit that you're going through, right? Like, yes, it's kind of great that like people are like, oh yeah, I don't notice, but the flip side of that is also this kind of like it feels so infuriating to like I don't remember not having eczema, like just have on and off like long year periods of flare-ups, like been in worlds of pain, worlds of insomnia, et cetera, obsessiveness. Do people like me? Whatever, right? And for people to then like for you to go to a restaurant and people not even like acknowledge or care about you enough to be like not even not advocate for you, like, but tell you to like chill the fuck out. Like I hold sometimes like a lot of anger for
For sure.
how alone this experience has been, because I have widely been alone for it.
For sure. One of the most scarring memories I had as a kid. I think I wasn't even a kid. I think I was like 14, 15 or something. But anyway, I remember being in a restaurant in, I don't know, it was like somewhere upstate New York or something. I don't know. Anyway, where my cousins and aunties lived. And we were at this Italian restaurant, and I ordered this thing, and I had to check with the waiter. I was like, do you use any butter or dairy in the spaghetti sauce or whatever? And the fucking waiter called me like fussy. He was like, "Oh, you're really picky. You're a fussy one,
Yeah,
aren't you?" And I
yeah.
was like, "No, dickhead." Like, kind of like, like whether or not like I'm just a fucking shivering mess under my duvet for the next 3 days, 4 days, or I actually get out and enjoy my vacation is
Yeah.
down to you fucking caring, asking the chef what the hell is in the meal I'm
Mm,
about to eat or that I want to eat.
yes.
It's not trivial. It's not me, and I, I just couldn't believe that I was being accused of being picky because maybe I wanted my skin not to flare up on
Yeah.
vacation. I was like, I don't know. I remember being so angry and going back to the house that night and still just like in a fit of rage. And I remember my cousins could not understand why I was so angry. Just
Mm,
so angry at the 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 attitude this guy had and the fact that I was like basically how I felt like pressured into not asking or not or like basically just eating this thing that I was unsure about because I was
mm,
there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was talking about before, like not making too much of a fuss.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to cause a scene. I was with family. You know, it's like I was so angry. No one understood why I was so fucking angry.
Yeah.
And I remember that night to my day because I realized exactly what you just said. Like I was so alone in in trying to make people understand in understanding what the hell I have to go through every day.
Yeah. People don't know. Like I think I love talking to people about it. I love doing this because like I had like another guest talk about kind of like the obsessions that she needs to have or they need to have with their body, and it's just kind of like I love that's what I want to talk about because it's kind of like we think about this all the time, like it's on our minds all the time, like it affects every little bit, and it has to come first beyond, like it comes into play in the consideration of like where I live in the world, like what I do, like what I eat, who I interact with, like what I interact with. And we never talk about it. And I also just like yeah, so I'm so happy you're talking about it. I'm sorry that so many of the times it's such an isolating feeling, especially when like it feels like such a sense of betrayal when your loved ones are just kind of like, why, what are you even talking about, when it's like
Yeah.
it's so intense, it's so intense, and it's kind of like they're like, what, why, like chill the fuck out. You're like, no.
You know, and like that's I kind of want to talk about like the silver linings, the positives of
Yeah.
having a skin condition, right? And
Yeah.
one of the related to what we're just talking about, one of the major positives is that in a way, like having a skin condition sort of has acted a bit of like a filter for me in my life for like people who get me, understand me, care about me.
Mm.
Ultimately, those who truly understand how much I struggle or how I struggle full stop with my skin and eczema are people I ultimately want to keep around me,
Mm.
right? I know they are good to me because like I know they're good for me and good to me because they will just change up a restaurant plan because I am a bit nervous about that place, or I know I can't eat anything on the menu, or they don't get too bothered by me bailing on a plan because my skin's suddenly shit that day, or you know, and that goes with friends, that goes with being in a relationship too. Like, you know, I could never date anyone that 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 just couldn't acknowledge any of that. That would be the hardest part of me. Like, I can't be intimate with someone if they can't be comfortable with, like, you know, the shit that comes with eczema. And in
Mm-hmm.
that way, like, it's a natural filter to those that don't understand. You know, I filter those people out. They're just not in my life in any substantial way. They're not close friends. You
Has that
know,
always been the case? Because I think something that essentially we're talking about is that, well, before it was like, I think through a lot of conditioning for a long time, we were understood to put other people's comfort before our own, or other people's like minor inconveniences over like, it's like, let's just, suffer for longer later, like let's, or whatever, because that's what people told us to do, or that's what the feeling was, even if they didn't like outwardly say it. Like, when did that click for you, that you're like, fuck this, if you can't get with the program, if you can't get with like who I am in the full spectrum of the fact that like sometimes I can't go out, or like, like I really can't, like my fucking dietary needs are like actually real, like when did that click for you, or was that always a thing?
yeah, I don't think I can pinpoint it.
Mm.
I think certainly growing older, more confident in myself, understanding that I could take a stand for myself,
Mm.
I didn't have to just do what other people expected me to do. And I think probably in my early 20s, I
Mm.
probably during university, I realized that like, oh, actually, like, oh, I am gonna make a fucking fuss in this restaurant, and if the server's being a dick, I'm gonna call him out. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm not that embarrassed to do that in front of my friends, because there's people, my friends should understand that the fuss I'm creating is justified.
Mm.
I'm not flipping tables or anything, and I'm
Right.
not storming out, but I am having quite stern words with a server that's not taking something seriously, or I
Mhm.
will check with the server 3-4 times if
Yeah.
they fucking understand.
Yeah.
And if that gives me peace of mind that the food that's coming my way and I'm going to eat is okay for me, then it's fucking worth it. I don't care if it's annoying the server. I don't care if I'm coming
My
across like,
my
annoying
workaround
to anyone.
my workaround is I go like, sorry, I don't remember. Did I mention that, like, and I'll say it like a couple, like I'll say it like a second time or a third time, pretending that like I don't remember if I said it or not. Because I'm like, I really need this not to be have the thing or the thing. Like,
Yeah, I do something similar, but I say like, "Oh, was everything okay with the allergies in the kitchen?" Or I'd be like, when they come back for a second, third time to like give joke, or I'd be like, "Oh, thanks so much for checking in with the kitchen with my allergy stuff."
yeah,
Just I don't know. It's just like hey, if you forgot about it, here's
yeah,
another reminder.
yeah,
And
totally.
that comes from a level of anxiety from my end too. But again,
Yeah,
like I said,
but
if it gives me
warranted
the peace
because
of mind,
people have forgotten. Like, and
yeah,
it's
for
just
sure.
them forgetting is, like, as you said, dictates whether you are essentially not mobile for like a couple days, or I don't know, depending on your flare up, like longer, right? So
Yeah, exactly. You know, I remember, yeah, like probably stopped giving a shit like when I was at university
that's
about all of
good.
that, and I was like, I need to take care of myself.
Yeah, fuck
Um,
it, because if you're not gonna do it, nobody's gonna fucking do it. Like,
but can I just talk about a couple of other positives that I
yeah,
think?
please. I was just gonna ask you. Like, I want to
Yeah,
hear about, because that's the word you used in our pre-interview, and I want to know because I find it really hard to feel blessings from this sometimes.
yeah, I think a lot. I've spent a lot of time like trying to process like you know what I've taken away from being who I am, and being who I am is someone who suffers from a skin condition, a chronic skin condition, right? And I think like some of them are kind of a little bit, silly,
No, we're
but
not. We're not.
true.
We're not doing that. It's not silly. It's not.
I mean, no, okay, that's the wrong word, but like, the first one that I always think about is how fucking operational and functional I am on like 3 hours sleep. Like
Mm,
since I was a kid, like
true. True.
there are
True.
nights where I've been so itchy, I haven't slept, I've woken up like 18 trillion
Yep.
fucking times, and I just like I can push through. I know I can push through. I'm not gonna, sink during the day because I have had lack of sleep. Like I can, I know my body's limits. I've
Mm,
pushed the sleep deprivation thing to a big degree,
yeah.
and
Feel you on
I know
that.
that if I can get through this day, no problem. I might feel like shit and I might be a
Mm,
bit grumpy, but I'm not. I know I can do it,
okay.
and you know so in that way I'm more in tune with my body, and in that respect, and I think that's definitely been a blessing in many many occasions. um where other people might start flagging and feel tired and start giving up, like I know I can keep going. um and just a level of resilience, I think. Like I sometimes think, what would my life be like if I didn't have eczema? Like, would my childhood be different? Would I be a different person? How would my personality have evolved differently? And actually, what I realized is that like my life wouldn't necessarily be better. I got to be honest. Like I would have been probably a very different person
Mm,
just by how much impact and on a daily basis that my skin has had
mm,
on my psychology, on my psyche, on the way I think, you know. And actually, it's given me a level of like inner steel
mm,
and like indelible resilience
mm.
to my personality that no one can ever take away from me. And I don't think I would have got from anywhere else, you know. Like
Totally.
having to deal with this condition all your life makes you
Where else are you
like
gonna get that much sleep deprivation? Nowhere. Absolutely
exactly,
nowhere.
exactly, but exactly, and like just yeah, just having to field all the questions and all the thoughts
Yeah.
and anxieties and the hard decisions you have to make about you know
Everything.
everything
Yeah.
and yeah, like just pushing through levels of discomfort on such a constant and consistent basis,
Inner
having it affect your
steel.
life. That is the biggest blessing for
I
me.
like that.
Is that is honestly and I just yeah it's made me the person who I am, and for that I can never regret. Not that regret kind of infers there was a wrong or right decision being made, but obviously not. Didn't have a
Yeah.
choice in having a chronic skin condition. But yeah, there's no like wish. There's no fantastical wish, but like, oh, I wish I never had eczema. Like, yeah, obviously there are moments where I was like, this is fucking annoying. I really wish I didn't have eczema. But
Yeah.
on the whole, like, it's given me as much as it's taken away. You know, in a
Ooh.
very real way.
Ooh. I thank you for sharing that. I like hearing you say that because I think that eczema has made me in some ways very conservative and with my sometimes with my calculations of what I'm capable of because I kind of have to be, and thus in turn it makes me quite an anxious person and anxious about my abilities. But like I loved hearing you say inner steel because what a good word for it, because I think I don't give myself enough credit for that or don't think about that enough because it's been hell sometimes, and I'm gonna have to listen to this a gajillion times when I edit, and I'm gonna love it because it's gonna remind me of that comment. I wanna learn from that kind of confidence and that kind of love that you have from yourself, because I think I have it sometimes. I think that there is a certain sense of like, fuck yeah, like I can do shit because eczema has tested my like mental strength and my physical strength in a way that is like beyond beyond. It's just very beyond. It is wild. I must say.
For sure. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I think we just have to remind ourselves that like there's that strength there, and ultimately you're stronger than a lot of other people.
Mm,
Um, and that people go through all kinds of trauma in their lives. There's different kinds of strengths you take from your all kinds of different experiences, chronic illnesses, skin conditions, and otherwise, right? But
mm,
yeah, like there's a type of strength you get from having a chronic discomfort, illness, whatever, that I think a lot of people just don't have, and it's important to remind yourself of that, like really, truly. And I struggle with I don't often remember that myself, but it's
yeah.
when you take that step back and realize that, like, I truly, truly believe it. I'm not just saying it as like a fucking veneer level affirmation or something
Yeah.
like that. I don't. I truly, truly have. I've come to terms with like to really believing that.
Good for you.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. I
And
think,
lots of other things too, right? Like, you know, like how you can empathize, how you empathize with people,
mhm.
how you view other people. Yeah, you know, in that way, like it has formed who you are, the way you think, the way you perceive the world and other people, quite drastically. And I don't think that should ever be ignored or taken for granted.
I think that I'm going to take away from this conversation the things that you mentioned as blessings and trying to think about those in a way that, like, I think that I do feel the same way, but I think entangled in those feelings for me still is a lot of anger and a lot of grief. And like, I think I want to be able to kind of like separate those more, like moving forward from like having listened to it and being reminded more of like the beauties of it. I don't know. It's even hard for me to say that, like the beauties of it, because I have so much like anger and resentment in some ways
Yeah.
for it. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think this is where we're going to end the conversation. Yay!
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to Dan for this conversation. Thank you for listening. This has been the In Our Bodies podcast. Again, I am Henry. Catch you at the next episode. Until then, gentle energy and take care.